Thursday, the 20th of March, and we're all happy to see the rain falling in Adelaide. Footy's started, summer sports champions are being decided. Hooky has a look into the Crows and Port start to the season, previews the Sheffield Shield final, and touches on some awards and final series coming up this weekend. Jason Gentle, coach of the Glenelg Premier Women's Cricket team, speaks with Ben ahead of their grand final match this Sunday. G'day, Hooky.
Hello, Wallace. Good afternoon. And I got wet this morning and I wasn't in the shower. Can you believe it?
Yeah, it's great to see, isn't it? I hope it lasts all day.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure to walk around the side of my house and turn the automatic sprinkler system off, knowing that I'm not going to have to run water for an hour on the front and back garden over the course of the next few days. That can stay off. Everything's lovely and wet. I don't have to pay another cent for SA Water's exorbitant bills.
I think it's perfect that it's arrived on a Thursday, just in advance, hopefully, of a clear weekend, because we're heading into finals and award season.
Yeah, well, that's right. So semi-finals for men's cricket, grand final for women's cricket, and semi-finals for softball, grand finals for baseball.
Correct. Yeah.
Wallace. So, yeah, a lot going on, and it can get ruined. All of these sports can get a bit ruined by weather. So hopefully we've had a good drench today, and that'll be it. We'll have a nice drying day tomorrow. It looks pretty good. And then the weekend is absolutely clear. Of course, the baseball starts on Friday night, so we might touch on that a little bit later on. But about perfect, I reckon. If you could order anything in, it would be a good deal of rain on we play golf on Wednesdays, don't we? So we like a nice dry Wednesday, a wet Thursday, and then a nice dry Friday again, so everything's perfect for Saturday.
Well, I think we're up at the Barossa recently. We had an Irish guy who was across for some golf, and so we took him up to Torbreck, and I got to say, I've never seen it so dry. So hopefully they've got a bit of that rain.
Yeah, well, as you know, I was in Vietnam a couple of weeks ago, and the last flight in was over from Melbourne, and just coming in over the western, east of Adelaide and out through that area. My goodness, everything is just light chocolate brown. It's just beige and brown everywhere. So there are some regional areas that are desperate for some rain, and hopefully they got plenty over the last 24 hours or so.
So shall we get started?
Come on.
Okay. So the footy season started. My Swans haven't started so well, but what I'm really
I'm surprised you even want to talk footy.
Well, my daughter reminded me that we had a cracking season one year when we started Norton 6. So fingers crossed. Right. She's gone early.
But you did run out of petrol. I think won an elimination, but lost a semi-final. I seem to recall that year. It's about 4 or 5 years ago, wasn't it?
Oh, it was, yes. So let's go local. What do you make of Port succession plan at this point?
Yeah. So, look, I'll start by saying this. I'm not a fan of succession plans. I think historically they haven't really worked, Wallace. They didn't work with Collingwood when the handover was from Mick Malthouse to Nathan Buckley. It didn't work at Essendon when it was John Worsfold who handed over to Ben Rutten. There is an argument that there was some success for Melbourne when Paul Roos handed over to Simon Goodwin, but Paul Roos wanted to go, and that's probably the one major difference between these other three. Is I don't think the incumbent really wants to finish up, whereas the club has sort of been encouraging them to finish up in, I guess, the softest way possible, if you like. The other thing I'll say about succession plans is when Nathan Buckley took over in 2016, I think it was. I mean, they were a kick from winning a premiership in 2018. That would have been a bit of a crowning glory for Eddie Maguire, wasn't it? So, look, personally, I don't like them, but I'm not completely out on it to the extent that everyone has been carrying on this week. But look, to tear up the idea of this succession plan after one bad game, that is just classic AFL media, isn't it? I mean, the irony is not lost on me that last week, Collingwood was the punching bag, too old, too slow, after one poor round against GWS. Collingwood wins and wins comfortably in their second game of the season, round one, and everyone says, oh, that was a cautionary tale. Don't go too quickly on a football club after one game. Oh, by the way, Port Adelaide was the team that they beat. Let's all pick on Port Adelaide and say that everything's got to be thrown out and dispensed with and started again. That's way too fast, and that is just a classic AFL media overreaction. So, look, this is what I would say. Compared to maybe 10 other teams in the competition, Port Adelaide is too good a club and too good a list not to win enough games that I think they probably still qualify for the 8. I think it would be a tall order to expect, in particular with what is inevitably going to be a transition that they're going through, and that's on-field and off-field, that they're going to be absolutely prime contenders for the premiership. But I reckon there's 10 teams that they'll beat, and they'll beat pretty comfortably this year. I reckon they find their way to 13, 14 wins and get into the finals. Yes, I don't love the long goodbye that they have generated for themselves, but I do think that jumping off them after one poor loss to Collingwood is both typically AFL and typically AFL way too fast to react.
So, Hooky, what would have you done this year?
Yeah, reasonable question. And I think you did have a choice here outside of the decision that Port Adelaide went down the road of. Look, I can understand from the perspective that you don't really want to sack Ken Hinkley because he's done a really good job. Outside of a grand final and a premiership, he's been an exceptional coach for Port Adelaide. His win-loss record is very good. He's got them into finals very, very regularly. So it's hard to sack him because he doesn't really deserve it. And you don't really want to pay him out either. But it just struck me that they were so desperate to avoid having to face some hard questions that they wanted to make this decision that Josh Carr was going to be the handover guy. And I just think that it makes life very difficult for them from here we go. So the media narrative was always going to be there. Whether Ken Hinkley was going to be their guy this year, was potentially going to be their guy next year, or whether they've done their hedge their bet system like they've come up with this handover process, there's always going to be this media narrative. Should they move? Should they keep him? At what point is the right time? And all they've done is they've boxed themselves into one option. So it has to be Josh Carr. You don't get the opportunity to consider Nathan Buckley. You don't get the opportunity to consider John Longmire. You don't get the opportunity to consider all of the various ranges of top-line assistant coaches that are out there, which is what Collingwood did with Craig McRae. And the other thing that Josh Carr is going to have is he's going to have very little long-term sympathy if he needs to take the team backwards for a period, as we've seen with Matthew Nicks at Adelaide. I mean, Nicks at Adelaide, 6 years, no finals. I mean, the fans' patience has worn out, but he's still got 6 years, you know? That never really happened at Adelaide, and it doesn't really happen at Port Adelaide either. So if Carr's got to take them backwards, he's just not going to get that little bit of sympathy factor as being a new coach. He's seen as the guy who's been there and in the chair for a couple of years already now. So I think it is going to make life as difficult for them in the long term, despite the fact that they were trying to save themselves some angst in the short term. They would have been better off wearing the short-term angst over having no coach appointed for next year right throughout this season rather than doing what they've done. Or find the cash and pay him out. You know, if he's not your guy, just decide that now, the cold, hard light of day. Yes, it would have been callous. Yes, it would have been very, very difficult on a guy who's done an amazing job. But if he's not your guy, he's not your guy. Find the money, pay him out, and get Josh Carr in straight away.
I think you're resting your case.
Yeah, I
am. Port Adelaide, another record at Port Adelaide's about to be broken. As a player and servant, where does Travis Boak rank?
Right up there, Wallace. Been an incredible servant of the club. And I'm reminded of the fact, and I know he was well paid for it, but he could have very, very easily gone back to Geelong, where he grew up, where his mum lives. He could have easily gone back and played for that club. He might have been going back for a little bit less money, but he would have been going back to a very, very comfortable environment. But instead, he chose to stick it with Port Adelaide for the long term. And it's extremely commendable. If you compare that to Jeremy Cameron at GWS, Patrick Dangerfield at the Adelaide Football Club, who all wanted eventually to go and find the safe confines of home, Travis Boak's commitment to Port Adelaide is second to none. And I've got him in their top 5 all time. And that's a difficult call that I've had to make here, Wallace, because I've left out some pretty unbelievable ones. But in amongst that top 5, I've got Russell Ebert, Foss Williams, Jeff Motley, Greg Phillips. And I'm leaving out guys like Bob Quinn. And I mean, Kane Corns, 300 gamer, he belongs. Warren Treadray, probably their most talented player of the modern era. Even Chad Corns has been a really special player. So Travis Boak, for me, 390 games, including everything that he's played with, pre-season and sample and so forth, has been just over all of Port Adelaide's storied history, one of their all-time greats. And he deserves to have a really good year this year to go out on a high, because he's just been such a champion for what is one of the nation's most proud football clubs.
So what did you make of Adelaide over the weekend?
Yeah, look, they were impressive. They were impressive against very concerning opposition. Gee, St Kilda, my goodness. I mean, they looked a better club when they were being coached by Brett Ratton, to be honest, and that's probably tough on Ross Lyon. And I know he's making some huge list changes, and they're very, very young right now. But, gee, I would have thought they were maybe better 2 years ago by comparison to where they're at right now. Look, it's easy for Adelaide to get carried away. I don't think they will. The one thing I loved, and I might not have got this right by the end, but they had 12 different goal kickers on the weekend. That's a lot of avenues to goal. And there's a part of me that sort of compares where they were at under Don Pike in 2016, 2017, when they were very, very successful. I feel like the forward line's got a similar structure to it. If I just take you to the forward line of that era, it was Taylor Walker, Josh Jenkins, Eddie Betts, Charlie Cameron, Tom Lynch, Richard Douglas were the main first six of the forward line. And a few other guys would drift in and out, of course. But if you compare that to now, so Riley Thilthorpe has become the Josh Jenkins of the forward line. Darcy Fogarty has become the Taylor Walker of the forward line. Taylor Walker, and I'm really interested in Taylor this year, I think he's almost become the Tom Lynch. He looks a lot fitter this year. I think he's going to do a lot more running and pushing up the ground. I think we'll see him playing a real tall high half forward role as a means of connecting the back half with the forward half. That's just my own personal opinion here. I haven't got any inside information on that, but I really feel like he's going to play a Tom Lynch role. Isaac Rankin looks everything like Eddie Betts, doesn't he? Just that mercurial ability to find a goal from nowhere. Josh Rochelli's becoming the Charlie Cameron. And then Richard Douglas, that role is really being filled by Cumming and Dawson, who are sort of pinch hitting in and out of the middle and then moving to the half forward line as well. So, look, I do want to see these guys against a club that isn't destined for the bottom four. That's where I think St Kilda's going to finish up. And I think they'll get a good test against Essendon this week. That's a team that really is in and around that midfield mix, along with Adelaide trying to find a spot in the top eight. So I think we get a good test of Adelaide this week. But everything you saw against a pretty poor opposition was extremely impressive.
A lot of hits and bangs over the weekend. What's your position on the Jackson Archer suspension?
Yeah, I'm probably very, very different to the prevailing AFL media opinion, and I was pretty comfortable with it. There has been hysteria from AFL media, hasn't it? You know, people are saying that this is the end of the game as we know it. Quite frankly, if that's truly the case, and look, I know I don't work in mainstream media anymore, so I don't want to be sounding like I'm throwing a hissy fit about the people who are, but quite frankly, if it's truly the case that you think that this is the end of AFL as we know it, can you stop taking a check to comment on it? Just quit. Otherwise, your words are just disingenuous hyperbole, Wallace, is what I think. I think this was pretty simple. He said by his own admission, Jackson Archer, that he chose to tackle, that he knew he couldn't get to the contest in time and that he was going to tackle. He said that himself at the tribunal. Once you choose to tackle, you have a duty of care to tackle safely. This was inordinately unsafe, that act, as a result of what the decision he made. I mean, for 10 years, we've been seeing dangerous tackles suspended by the AFL tribunal. I accept that there's another generation, my generation, I suppose, that found this act brave, but brave can't be confused with the modern standard of flagrantly unsafe. And I thought this was flagrantly unsafe, and I think it warranted a suspension. Now, for all those who suggest that this is the end, this is ruining the fabric of the game will be fine and players will adjust. And the loudmouths who are declaring it the end of footy, I guarantee you, after this suspension this week, they'll still be earning a living from footy next week. This won't change the game. It won't change anything. The game will move on. We'll develop the way we need to understand how people have a duty of care to their opposition. This is a modern society where we expect contact sport to still be played in a manner that's as safe as it possibly can, and suspending Jackson Archer for his action is a part of that.
We're a week on from the battle over Adelaide Oval. How are you feeling about the Sheffield Shield?
I'm feeling very relaxed about it, Wallace. I'm excited for the fact that South Australia is hosting it. I think Karen Rolton is a very, very good venue. It'll be an excellent pitch. It's a beautiful outfield. It's a nice boutique ground for cricket to be played. I do think it doesn't particularly well cater to large throngs of fans, and that's going to be a challenge on the weekend if the game is tight and 3, 4, 5, 10,000 people want to go and watch, because it's really not equipped for that. Even from as simple as there's not enough toilets, they're going to have to bring in a lot of temporary toilets and those sorts of things, a lot of catering. Everything's there at Adelaide Oval and it's not there at Karen Rolton Oval. So in spite of the fact that I don't think it'll be ideal for spectators, it will be ideal for the quality of the match. Am I disappointed this isn't an Adelaide Oval? Yes, I absolutely am. Adelaide Oval is supposed to be a shared venue, and I think it is unfortunate that after all of the modern technology that's gone into the capacity to move wickets in and out of this ground, we still can't share this facility properly. I am frustrated at the AFL, who said that this was just too dangerous for their players to be walking out onto a field of play 48 hours after a cricket pitch has been pulled out. I am reminded of an incident in 2017 when England played a Cricket Australia 11 in a match that finished at 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. They took the pitch out that night and put the traditional surface in the middle of the ground in the middle of the night. And at 3:40 the next day, Australia played Ireland in an international rules series match that was an AFL endorsed fixture. So this happened in November. It happened inside one day, not 2 days, as cricket was trying to make the point that this is what they wanted to do. There are an inordinate amount of ways that you can roll the longer grass down to make it suitable for cricket and then brush it back up when you want it to be suitable for football without cutting it or, working out a weird way to get it to grow. You can fertilise at the right times. I've heard Les Burdett talk about this. There are so many things you can do. This could have comfortably been played at Adelaide Oval, and it is a real disappointment that it's not. And I think the AFL, quite frankly, is making a rod for its own back, because I reckon there's going to be a point, maybe it'll be this year, maybe it'll be next year, where the AFL goes to the Adelaide Oval Stadium Management Authority and said, would you believe Port Adelaide or the Adelaide Crows have qualified to host the AFLW Grand Final, and we would love for it to be at the end of November at Adelaide Oval. And Adelaide Oval is simply going to have to turn around and respond and say, well, we've got a test match coming up in 2 weeks. By your own standard, it is very, very difficult for us to take pictures out for a game of football and then put them back in and to have that safe for elite athletes. The answer is going to be no. Head off to Unley Oval or Alberton Oval, and that will be a real disappointment for spectators. I'm reminded that it was only 6 years ago that Adelaide hosted an AFLW Grand Final and 53,000 people turned up. That doesn't work at Unley Oval or Norwood Oval or Alberton Oval if it's Port Adelaide. So, yeah, there are some major disappointments with all of this. And yes, it does, I guess, harbour back to the fact that, in particular, in the modern era, the AFL just refuses to provide a free kick for any other sport. And I think it'll be to its own detriment at some point.
Everyone is a competitor.
Yeah, and needlessly so. I mean, these are shared venues. You are actually far better off working with a sport to try and achieve their goals, working on the basis that there'll be some shared value there somewhere down the track. And the AFLW is my most obvious example of a sport that would, a code that's going to love to play a football game during cricket season. It can be done,
yep.
But by the AFL's own opinion, it can't or it shouldn't. And that's madness.
Okay, let's move on to the sports wrap. Softball finals minor round finished Wednesday. We've got the semis coming up this weekend.
Yeah, so the top team, Walkerville, will play Seacombe. And though the winner of that game goes straight through to the grand final, Port Adelaide and West Torrens, who've probably been the two most successful clubs of recent years, will play off for a spot in the preliminary final. So that gets underway, I reckon, around about 5 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. But it's the grand finals of baseball, which have come around on me pretty quickly, Wallace. And your club, Sturt, has a chance to achieve an historic double.
Ben, yes, both the women and men Div 1 teams are reigning premiers and will compete in grand finals this weekend. The men start their best-of-3 series on Friday night against Henley and Grange, and the women play their grand final on Sunday at 11 a.m.
They'll take on Woodville as well. Now, Woodville, I can't think of her first name, which is embarrassing. There's a young teenager whose first name starts with A and her surname is Brown. I've done a story on her and I'm embarrassed I cannot remember her first name, but I noticed that she has been she's really led Woodville. Like Georgia Davis has done a wonderful job with Sturt. This young teenager with a surname Brown has been very, very impressive for Woodville as well, and has been for a number of years. In fact, I reckon it was either last year or the year before. She was named the best under-16 player in the boys under-16 competition as a pitcher, which is pretty incredible.
Amazing. Yeah, it's going to be a great contest. I mean, they're playing at Westbeach, so it's a big diamond. If the wind's blowing, it'll affect the game.
And, 3-game series for the men, Henley and Grange taking on Sturt. That's Friday night, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, Wallace. So after a pretty wild bunch of finals in the lead-up, these two teams are the last two standing.
Yeah, I mean, Sturt bats were absolutely hot. Jordan McArdle hit a grand slam in the last game. Terrell Joyce hit a couple earlier, so there were big numbers being put up. Henley and Grange played Sturt last year in the grand final. It was played at Henley and Grange because they were the higher-ranked team, which Sturt won. Now they're at Westbeach, so again, neutral diamond. It'll be really interesting. And Friday, 7 o'clock, they hit off, and it's going to be a very, very exciting series.
Caps Medal was last night, Wallace. Often that's the same night as the Rolton Bradman Medal, but the Caps Medal was Wednesday night. So what's the date today? The 20th. So it was the 19th last night, wasn't it? Sammy Steigert has won the Caps Medal for the Port Adelaide Baseball Club, and Georgia Davis, who we've been talking about, has won the women's medal. So brilliantly hosted by Ali Clark as well. I watched a little bit of the live stream. She's just a star. But yes, congratulations to both Sammy and Georgia.
Yeah, brilliant. Now,
local cricket finals, if I can just touch on those. Tetra Gully will play West Torrens in the first semi-final. That's out at Purtaringa. Sturt take on Kensington at Price Memorial Oval. That's in the men's Premier first grade. The men's Premier second grade, Woodville will take on the Saka under-19s. Here's an interesting story. Saka under-19s can win the premiership and not get promoted. They'll stay in Division 2 regardless. That's the rule. So Woodville and East Torrens are already, they were the two teams relegated out of Division 1 last year. They'll be the two teams promoted back up into Division 1 this year. The Saka under-19s, regardless of how they perform, they're required to stay in Division 2. So it's Glenelg and Adelaide Uni that'll come back down. I just want to touch on ATCA very quickly. The four big clubs of the last 10 years, Paraka, Grange, Goodwood and Para Hills are the four semi-finalists. So that's on this weekend. The two winners go through to the grand final the week after, which leads me to, Wallace, the women's grand final, which is on this Sunday. This is Premier first grade. Glenelg taking on Kensington. Glenelg got the berth straight through to the grand final after finishing top at the end of the minor round. Kensington, they're going for four straight, Wallace. It's quite incredible what they have done. They looked, in fact, I think I might have said last week that they really have fallen a bit off a cliff. Gee, I want to take those words back. They've won through to another grand final. They did it the hard way. They conjured 188 out of sort of nowhere. And then there was a couple of times they were completely out against Sturt. They weren't going to win. I think it was 6 for 160, chasing 189 to win. And they just put so much pressure on Sturt. They forced 3 run-outs of the next 4 wickets. So you can imagine just the chaos that was going on in that game. So Sarah Lowe and her troops have done it again. So they'll take on Glenelg at Park 25, number 2 on Sunday. And our guest coming up after a break is Jason Gentle, who is the coach of the minor premiers, Glenelg.
Good stuff, Hooky.
Got a couple of things to add. We're going to chat to Dylan Hicks next week, who's going to take us through everything that has gone on with State League tennis. And there was one other thing I wanted to mention. I wanted to congratulate Ian Barnes. Go on, ask me the question. Who is Ian Barnes?
Who's Ian Barnes?
Who is Ian Barnes? Well, he's been heavily involved in the Brighton Cricket Club. He was awarded a Community Cricket Award for 50 years of service to the Brighton Cricket Club. So I have a photo in front of me here of him with Saka CEO Charlie Hodgson, who made the presentation to him. But I just wanted to congratulate Ian Barnes. I mean, you and I both know very well how local sporting clubs rely on the ongoing contribution of volunteers. And for Barnesy to do this for 50 years straight is pretty incredible. So congratulations to Ian, Brighton Cricket Club, Ian Barnes, on his 50 years of service to that club. It is extraordinary.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Okay, Ben catches up with Jason Gentle after this break.
Well, it's a massive day on Sunday at Park 25, number 2, when the Saka Premier Women's First Grade Final takes shape It will be Kensington chasing their 4th straight title, and they'll be facing the Glenelg Cricket Club, one of the relative newcomers to Premier Cricket. They've been pretty competitive all the way through. They would love to win a title. Their coach has been good enough to join us. His name is Jason Gentle. He's with us now. Jason, welcome to Hooked on Sport.
Thank you for having me, Ben.
Top of the table, you would have, I guess, paid some attention to what was going on with the semi-final last weekend. How do you feel 4 days out from, I guess, what's probably the biggest game of your coaching career?
Mate, so far, absolutely. Very excited, in short. The girls have put in a great effort all season, and, as we know, playing in grand finals doesn't necessarily come around very often unless you're the Kensington Cricket Club. So for us, we're very, very excited to be amongst it, but we're not done yet.
Take the year, everyone plays 12 matches, so it's a 15-round season. There's 3 byes, 5-team competition. Mm-hmm. You finished up with 9 wins from 12. I imagine your team bounces around a fair bit as well with the amount of cricket that's played at domestic level for the women, and you've got a number of your players who are involved at that level. So do you go through a number of players throughout the year, Jace?
We do, yeah. So we have 5 in the state system for the SA side, as well as Tali McGrath on top of that when she's playing her national honours. And the number of junior competitions that are played throughout the year as well. So, yes, we definitely go through quite a few. We would have played over 22 players, I believe, this year in the first grade.
I'm not surprised to hear that. Just take us through who have been some of your best performers. Lucy Bowring, no stranger to this podcast. We've talked about her and her brother Will in the past, the 2 best spinning siblings in South Australia. But just give us a bit of an overview of who's really performed well for the Seahorses.
Sure. Lucy Bowring, obviously with her 28 wickets for the year, has led the competition, continues to impress year in, year out and getting better and better. We've had a lot more contributors this year with the bat, which has been nice. Kayla McGrath, the captain's had a very solid season. Ella Wilson's had her best season with the bat, proving she's more than just a bowler, making over 300 runs. We had Kate Peterson before she had to have her shoulder surgery. Played 3 games, averaged 127 for the 3 games she played. So very handy contribution, those ones. And I think what's been our strength this year is we haven't just relied on 1 or 2. It's been great those that have had good seasons, but we've had a lot of even contribution across the board from bowlers chipping in with wickets each week and 20s and 30s here and there.
I would imagine Courtney Webb, as much as you talk about you've got some contributors with the bat, Courtney Webb getting a big score is going to be take you a long way towards winning this title, Jace.
Mate, that's rubbing salt in the wound there. Courtney Webb, unfortunately, is unavailable this weekend.
Oh.
Yes, no, that does hurt, but good for her. She's been selected to play for the Australian A side. So she flies out to go represent the country versus England next week.
Oh, well, you can't argue with that. But, she's going to leave a bit of a hole in your team because even the last minor round game, an even paced 85 not out to chase down Sturt's total of, 163 you needed to win. So, yeah, she will be someone that you will miss, and you'll need probably a couple of contributors to make that up.
Absolutely, and that's where I think from our end, it presents another opportunity. And what our year's been about, we've had opportunities for many people to step into different roles, and we've been able to blood people in different roles this year, and it just proves another opportunity for somebody else to stand up.
Let's talk about your opponents very briefly. The Kensington Cricket Club, they've won the last 3 flags. They haven't had it all their own way this season, but here they are at the pointy end once again. Did you watch the preliminary final? I mean, that was just a classic Kensington victory. They looked down and out, maybe on a couple of occasions, forced 3 run-outs at the end and just turned that game around. It was a very, very Kensington way to make a grand final, wasn't it?
Definitely was. I did watch the last half of it. I went out to watch my Crows play first, which was nice. But yeah, when I got back, I watched the remainder part of the game, and absolutely, it's what Kensington do very well is they just find a way. They manage to keep themselves in the contest as long as possible, and they're a very good side at squeezing and building pressure. So we know we definitely have our work cut out against us on the weekend.
Who are their biggest threats? The obvious 2, I would argue, Bridget Patterson, who's going to open the batting and wicket keep, batted really well in that semi-final, 72 from just 59 balls. And Sarah Lowe, the captain, probably hasn't had it all her own way with the bat this year, but she's been pretty influential with the ball. And she is just a born leader, isn't she, Sarah? She knows how to marshal a team, and she knows how to maybe create 11 players and build them up into something more than the sum of their parts.
Absolutely. They're a very well-oiled machine. And as you said, Bridget Patterson's a cut above this grade of cricket. She's a great performer at state level. So at this level, she's obviously a standout. I'd throw into that mix as well Eliza Doddridge, very aggressive cricketer at the start in the top order. Not to mention Courtney Neal and Phil Sell with the ball as well, the opening bowlers for the state. So they've got a jam-packed lineup.
Yeah, I mean, Courtney Neal can hold the bat as well. Same, Eliza Doddridge, very handy all-rounder. She's going to bowl some overs. She's useful in the field. So, yeah, I just feel like even though maybe they don't quite have the depth they once have, Kensington, they've got so many players who can do so many different things. That depth sort of gets covered up by just the quality of their top end.
Agreed, it does. But also, it's their work rate and their willingness never to give in. Jamie Pinelli's obviously done a great job instilling that in amongst his group. And as you said, with Sarah Lowe at the helm, you don't win 3 flags in a row by mistake.
What do you make of Glenelg's performance thus far as one of the relative newcomers into the women's competition? It has bounced around a little bit. Adelaide is more recent than Glenelg, but you'd probably argue that the way Glenelg has come into it organically, developing a really strong second grade team, played in a grand final a couple of years ago against Kensington. I just feel like the way the club has built slowly but surely is something that is going to leave the group and this bunch of players are leaving the club in very good stead long term.
I totally agree. Graham Sedgenary has been a huge instrument setting up our club system and structure. And our B grade, our B grade won the grand final last year and are in the grand final again this year as well. So a lot of time and effort goes into the next gap, the next tier. And we've got some very exciting talent who we believe there's probably 4 or 5 future state players coming through that next tier, that 12 to 15-year-old age gap. That's very exciting.
And Jace, just very quickly touch on the men. I mean, it's a tough competition, isn't it? So Glenelg, favourites going into the grand final last year, lose to Port Adelaide and now relegated. I mean, I don't know that I need you to necessarily give a full and frank opinion, in particular if it's wanting to tear strips off Saka. But, gee, it is a tough competition, isn't it?
Mate, it is what it is. There's no point tearing strips off anybody. The rules are there for everyone. We all knew at the start of the year. It's just tough. Cricket's a tough game. You're obviously finishing top last year, so you play the top sides again a couple of times this year in that AFL type evening up situation. And look, I think from our club's point of view, we're quite honoured and privileged to have had players that we've helped develop or push to get to that next level in state cricket. And for years, we had them while they were on the fringe and were huge contributors to the side. Obviously, then losing them to full-time cricket commitments this year and higher honours is great for them, but it probably left a hole in our side at times as far as and tested our depth. But I'm sure the club will bounce back well from the opportunity. It's a very well-run club, a lot of history, a lot of pride involved, and so I'm pretty sure it'll be just a one-year blip on the radar.
Just to wrap things up, mate, Bradman Rolton medal coming up next Wednesday night. You know the Bradman medal pretty well. Your dad's won it in the past. Steve won it for Adelaide in the late 70s, I reckon it might have been, gents. So we're going back a fair way now. But let's start with the Rolton medal first. I'm pretty sure that you have studied the best players of the Women's Premier competition quite studiously over the course of the last 6 months. Who can you see taking out the Rolton medal on next Wednesday night?
I think Beth Worthley's had a fantastic year. Great up-and-coming batsman keeper who made a big ton against us in the 2020 final. She's had a great finish to the year and starting to really develop into a great player, almost pushing to that next level selection. I think she'll give it a shake. I think Lucy Barron will give it a shake, leading the wickets, especially before Christmas. She had big holes of wickets in clumps. So I think she will also poll very well.
And I don't know how close you are to the Bradman medal, mate, but that, of course, goes off on the same night. You got a feel for where that's going to head?
To be honest, mate, no, not really. I haven't really paid that much attention to it. As much as I love my cricket, etc., the women's side's pretty much dominated my time in life these days. So
to wrap it up, Jace, Sunday, Park 25. What time does the game start? About 10:30?
10:30, yes.
And what are the things your Glenelg Seahorses are going to have to get right to overcome Kensington on the weekend?
I think we should play our best cricket. One, not get overawed by the situation, and just get back to the basics of every contest. We look to perform in every contest. We give it our best and enjoy the opportunity. Big believer of don't fear the reaper. So don't fear failure, but let's make sure we take the game on still.
Brilliant, mate. And I can't go away with that. No one can see this. It's not really a visual medium, but you've got the most enormous throne of an office chair there. Yes. You're the mastermind behind Photobase. Just tell us a little bit about business for you when you're not coaching a cricket club.
Mate, thank you. Now, our business, we specialise in marketing, so primarily in the real estate sector with photography, videography, signage, and digital print. We've been doing that for 25 years, and it's been going quite well for me. As far as the chair goes, I did order that online and was quite surprised when it arrived. I didn't realise it was so big, to be fair. So, yes.
Yeah, it looks like you should have one of your servants come along and feeding you grapes and waving you with a fan. Jace, thanks so much, mate. Great to chat. Always good to catch up as well. Just to clarify, Jason and I have been mates for many, many years, both involved with both the Adelaide and Glenelg cricket clubs. I'm very excited for you, mate. You've done an amazing job this year. All the best on the weekend.
Thanks, Ben.
Now, Hooky, it's been a while since we've spoken about your running. How's it going?
Pretty good. So I was in Vietnam and I got a lot of good long runs done, which I wasn't quite sure I'd be able to do just because you're never really sure of the topography and where there's the space to run. And it's pretty chaotic traffic over there. So thankfully I found a couple of riverside runs and a couple of parks that were really beautiful. I got sick towards the end, unfortunately. So I ended up having around about a week off, but I'm right back into a program now. I've got a formal running program that's online. It's interactive. I use an app, and I'm 20 weeks out from the marathon as of this week, which I'm planning to do in early August, Wallace. So it was actually quite good because after my first run, which you know what the first run's always like when you're starting a new program, it's a bit short and it's a bit slow, and I pushed myself a little bit harder. And I thought, this will be good. The app will give me a pat on the back and say, well done. You're obviously in pretty good shape. And it said, you idiot, that's way too fast. What do you think you're doing? You've got a lot harder stuff than this yet. So it sort of gave me a clip, which was good. And I've got a run to do this afternoon. And that's even said to me, do not go any faster than this pace. Whatever you do, you've got to go slow. So no, I feel like I'm building up really well. I did some intervals this week, some 1 kilometre intervals, which is the first real speed training I've done outside of all the base work I'm doing. So no, I feel good.
Great. So what are the long runs? How many long runs are you doing a week and how long are they?
I'll be doing one long run a week. Yep. My long run has sort of got up towards about 16, 17, 18 Ks. It actually drops back to 7 kilometres on this program. So I really feel like I'm under the odds a bit. But the program has already recalibrated where I'm at. It's telling me that I'm going to go a little bit faster, just where it has an understanding of what my fitness base is. I mean, that's not fast by any stretch. I won't be really running anything inside a 5-minute kilometre, but it is allowing me just to push myself a little bit harder without the potential to break me, which I'm always concerned about at my age, Wallace.
100%. Hey, is it Garmin or what's the app?
No, the app is called Runner, RUNNA. So everything is linked. I've got Garmin for the watch. I've got Strava, which sort of measures the run, and then they all link back to Runner to conclude where the program's at. So yeah, I feel like for an old bloke, I'm fairly heavily into the technology here, but no, I'm really pleased. I feel confident in my body. I mean, there was a period of time where I would run and every step I thought, am I going to pull a calf here? And I'm just not in that space at the moment. I really feel like I can run, push myself. I mean, I'm just not pushing myself too hard, but I'm well within the confines of what I'm expecting of myself in this program. And I don't feel like an injury's around the corner, which is good.
Brilliant. Excellent. So what are you going to catch up with this weekend? There's a lot of sport on. What are you going to have your eyes on?
Yeah, there is plenty on. I'll certainly be keeping an eye on the men's cricket semi-finals, the women's cricket final. I've got Bradman Rolton medal coming up on Wednesday. I've already asked Jason Gentle his opinion on where the Rolton medal is going to go. He's not quite across the Bradman medal, of course, but that's always a big night. So I'm hosting that. And then, of course, the Sheffield Shield final starts on that day. So I will be probably looking forward to a bit of a freshen up over the course of the next 3 or 4 days before I really get into a busy period. I will have to say as well, It's my Auntie Lorraine's 80th birthday. It was her birthday yesterday, and we've got a big dinner for her tomorrow night. So happy birthday, Lorraine Hook.
Happy birthday, Auntie Lorraine. Hey, one final question on the Sheffield Shield. South Australia have just played Queensland at Karen Rolton Oval. Have we lost, or did we ever have any home ground advantage by playing there?
I think we had a tiny bit more home ground advantage at Adelaide Oval. I think there's a little bit more in it for the bowlers at Adelaide Oval, and I fancy our bowling attack against any other team in the country. And I think our batting is strong enough to deal with a marginal wicket. My fear playing at Karen Rolton Oval is if the wicket is flat, that Marnus Labuschagne and Usman Khawaja could get away from the South Australians. I also think it's very, very difficult to pick Lloyd Pope at Karen Rolton Oval because the ground is so small that mishits are still going to go for six with the modern cricket bat. So I do think South Australia loses one of its potential aces in its pack is its versatility of its bowling lineup depending on the conditions. Unless it's an absolute raging turner, and I don't think Trent Kelly will be encouraged to produce one. I think South Australia's pace attack is such that they'll want to see some pace and bounce in the wicket. I really do think Lloyd Pope becomes potentially very, very unlucky as the guy to miss, and they'll go in with 3 quicks plus Liam Scott with Alex Carey batting in the top 6. So I think it'll be Liam Scott at 7, Menenti will play, and then the 3 bowlers. And that will be an interesting selection in its own right. Henry Thornton's come back into the team and done very well. Nathan McAndrew is absolutely certain to play. Jordan Buckingham is a question mark because they're going to have to consider whether they're going to bring back Brendan Doggett, and I would understand that. He's been very, very important this year. Wes Agar probably a little bit far off with an injury, but they could actually leave out Thornton and Buckingham to bring in Doggett and Scott, which would mean Lloyd Pope still does play. But then I'm just not sure if Pope plays at Karen Rolton Oval. So some good questions being asked for South Australian cricket. But yeah, still, I would feel sick for whoever misses out of any of those guys because they all have earned a spot.
Okay, Hooky, enjoy your weekend. Look forward to catching up next week.
Great to chat, mate.